The K-18 Karelia is more than just a submarine still operating long after its prime. It is a microcosm of the Russian state's deeper structural decline, institutional dishonesty, and dependence on symbolism to compensate for the erosion of real power. What was once a product of Cold War ambitions has become a decaying vessel suspended between technical obsolescence and political necessity. Its very existence in 2025 is not an affirmation of strategic relevance, but a demonstration of a government's inability to adapt, evolve, or confront its own decay. Built in the final years of the Soviet Union and commissioned in 1989, the Karelia was launched into a world that no longer exists. It was created at a time when the USSR was still locked in an arms race with the West, still convinced that sheer mass and quantity could compensate for inefficiency and economic rot. That same mindset, astonishingly, persists today in the Russian leadership's approach to military modernization. The Karelia is held up as a relic of pride, a totem of nuclear deterrence, when in truth, it is a decades-old vessel well past its intended lifespan, serving in a fleet that is more dependent on refurbishment and ritual than readiness and reliability. This submarine was originally designed to carry out strategic deterrence patrols, crucial missions that require stealth, technological superiority, operational reliability, and crew cohesion. None of these qualities can be assured in a platform whose base systems, hull, and propulsion were developed during the era of cassette tapes and analog computers. While some onboard systems have been replaced or modernized, the structural realities of the Karelia remain unchanged. Metal fatigues, electronics degrade, and systems designed for short-term Cold War use are now being asked to function in a 21st-century strategic environment that demands far more than they can deliver. Despite this, the Russian government continues to publicize the Karelia's presence, rolling it out during exercises, showcasing it during political statements, and declaring it a functioning element of the nuclear triad. These performances are not rooted in military strategy, they are driven by political optics. They exist to create the impression that Russia's strategic capabilities remain formidable, unshaken, and ready. That impression, however, is increasingly detached from operational reality. To maintain this illusion, the state has relied on a tightly controlled narrative. In the Russian system, weakness is not admitted, it is covered, denied, or rebranded as strength. The Karelia's repeated refurbishments, done not to improve performance but simply to keep the vessel afloat, are repackaged and marketed to the public as signs of modernization. In reality, they are acts of desperation, extending the life of a machine that should have been retired years ago, if not decades ago. They reflect not a strategy of progress, but one of survival, a refusal to admit that the country lacks the industrial and financial capacity to build enough new submarines to replace the old. This refusal has serious consequences. Propping up obsolete systems diverts scarce resources from more essential and future-oriented investments. Time, money, and labor are spent keeping relics like the Karelia marginally operational, instead of designing and constructing the next generation of submarines with up-to-date capabilities. The leadership clings to these older vessels not because they are efficient or modern, but because building new ones in sufficient numbers is no longer possible under the current state of Russia's economy and industrial base. The result is a hollowing out of military power masked by surface-level displays. Beneath the surface, internal issues compound. The problem: the Russian military's personnel infrastructure is cracking, as evident in various documented discipline incidents aboard aging vessels. One such case involving the Karelia itself included the misconduct of a high-ranking political officer during deployment, reflecting not just an individual failing but a deeper breakdown in morale, oversight, and command culture. When submarines that carry nuclear warheads are plagued by a lack of professionalism at the leadership level, the strategic risks rise exponentially. Yet even these incidents are buried beneath state-controlled messaging and ignored by a government more focused on appearances than safety or operational excellence. The systemic rot extends far beyond the hull of one submarine. The Karelia is only one example in a fleet populated by aging platforms that were once hailed as cutting-edge but are now well past their shelf life. The broader defense industry, plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and brain drain, has not kept pace with technological development elsewhere. Skilled engineers leave for better opportunities, resources are siphoned off into elite connected defense contracts that fail to deliver, and what remains is a broken supply chain and a shrinking base of expertise trying to maintain 20th-century technology in a 21st-century conflict environment. And yet, the Kremlin insists on parading this vessel as a key strategic asset. Its participation in carefully staged missile drills is shown on television. Its movements are framed as demonstrations of strength. Its very survival is positioned as a victory. But these messages are not designed for outside analysts, they are designed for domestic consumption. They aim to reassure a population under increasing economic and geopolitical pressure that their nation remains a great power. The longer this illusion is maintained, the greater the eventual reckoning when the truth is laid bare. The Karelia, in 2025, is not a symbol of deterrence. It is a symbol of denial. It represents a nation led by a government more interested in maintaining the image of strength than confronting the reality of decline. A submarine that should have been scrapped is instead patched, polished, and used as a political stage prop. It sails not as a guardian of strategic stability, but as a floating performance piece, part of a theater designed to distract from the fact that Russia is losing its grip on modern warfare. Each day the Karelia remains in operation, the gap between Russia's claimed military power and its actual capabilities grows. Each refit, each parade, and each scripted missile launch only underlines how much of the country's defense posture is based on image, not substance. This is not strategic planning, it is inertia disguised as tradition, theater disguised as readiness, and propaganda disguised as deterrence. At its core, the story of the K-18 Karelia is not about one vessel's survival, but about a system's refusal to evolve. It is about leadership that fears transparency, about institutions that reward loyalty over competence, and about a culture that confuses maintenance of the old with preparation for the new. It is not just a failing submarine, it is the shadow of a failing system. A system that clings to the past because it cannot build a future. A system that insists on projecting strength while rotting from within. The Karelia still floats, but only because Russia has decided that floating is good enough. That is not power. That is collapse in slow motion.